Okay, I think maybe we start, and welcome everybody to this special edition of the GO2NE webinar series, which is also a satellite event of the Healthy and Resilient Ocean Decade Laboratory. And I'm Kirsten at the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, and providing technical support to the Global Ocean Oxygen Network and the Global Ocean Oxygen Decade. And without further ado, I hand over to the co-chairs of GO2NE and also leads of the Global Ocean Oxygen Decade, Marilaure Grégoire from the Liège University and Andreas Oschlies from GEOMAR.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kirsten. Thank you all attendees. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And we will walk you through the issue of oxygen and deoxygenation in the ocean today. And as one of the co-chairs of the Global Ocean Oxygen Decade, I'm Andreas Oschlies, and together with Marilaure Grégoire, we will start giving you an overview of this UN Decade program. And then Marilaure and Véronique Garçon will provide you with more details about assessing predicting deoxygenation. And then you see the agenda here. We have go more and more into the details. So I start with the general, the larger picture. What is this about? Global Ocean Oxygen Decade. And it's about oxygen in the ocean. Here you see a map, a global map of oxygen concentration. It's not uniform. Oxygen is dissolved, a gas in the water, in the seawater, and it's needed for all higher trophic levels for animals to breathe. We see the total, there's these pinkish regions and the eastern tropical oceans with traditionally, naturally low oxygen levels underneath productive regions where a lot of organic matter sinks down, is respired in the ocean, and where ocean currents are relatively sluggish and don't supply a lot of oxygen. Since the ocean overall contains a minor component of the oxygen in the Earth system, of the free oxygen, it's about 0.6% of the oxygen, and 99.4% are in the atmosphere. So the atmosphere is the main reservoir of oxygen, and it's connected via the sea surface to the ocean. And so we need ocean transport, physical transport, to bring oxygen into the ocean interior, where in the dark, oxygen can only be respired and not produced in any significant amounts by marine biota. So respiration continuously consumes oxygen. Supply has to come from contact with the atmosphere. And we see that there's an increasing number of low oxygen environments where we have fish kills and even coral reefs die when low oxygen waters come close enough to the surface. And these are all the red dots here on this map where there are more and more reports. There are more and more reports, of course, also because more people walk on the beach with mobile phones and can take pictures and report them, send them around. But as a science-driven program, we want to understand have a quantitative understanding of by how much is this increasing, where, and also why. We are concerned, and all these red points are reasons for concern, because there are observations of low oxygen or up to zero oxygen levels and associated consequences for higher trophic levels in the ocean, in the water, where particularly coastal societies depend on. We also see in our databases, all the historical data. Here's the first compilation of these. There's also a decline not only along the coasts where people walk and we watch it from land, but also in the ocean interior. There's a decline in oxygen concentrations. Here, the red color is a decline over the 5 decades, 1960 to 2010, where integrated over the water column, there has been an observed loss of oxygen. So almost everywhere, all ocean basins see a loss of oxygen. And if it's integrated up with some uncertainties because of incomplete data coverage, it's a 2% loss during this 5 decades. of the ocean oxygen inventory. And this is quite substantial. So if you extrapolate that in 2,500 years, there wouldn't be any oxygen left in the ocean if we or the ocean continues to decrease, to lose oxygen at this rate. This is perhaps one of the fastest changes, relative changes we see right now in any global reservoir or global property of the planet. And to some surprise, current climate models do not really model this, or there's no good agreement with the data. They see a model about a third, maybe some models only half of the observed oxygen loss over those 5 decades. And so this is reason of concern, since that means current models do not really resolve some of the mechanisms, the processes, and maybe there are substantial deficiencies in these models, which also might have implications for carbon uptake, for heat uptake, and so on, for all transport processes in the ocean, or for the description of biological processes that interact here. Physics supplies oxygen, biology respires, consumes oxygen. And so this interplay apparently has some deficiencies in the way we present it in current models. And yeah, this is the underestimation factor 2 to 3 in the best, the IPCC type models, CMIP models that we have today. And we think we need to better understand this. What is going on? Why is the ocean losing so much oxygen so quickly? And what are the consequences? So the high level objectives that led us to developing first the global oxygen network, GO2NE, and the global ocean oxygen decade, the UN decade program that emerged out of this global ocean oxygen network, the working group by IOC and UNESCO, is here given by these high-level objectives: provide data, knowledge, and best practices. So also observing oxygen, reporting values, putting them into globally available databases, sharing information. And then if we have this information, co-design and develop measures that can mitigate the drivers and impacts, or if that's not possible, provide appropriate adaptation measures. And at the same time, use all this to ensure provision of ecosystem services, particularly along the coastal regions where people, societies depend on food from the ocean, maybe also depend on tourism, on many ocean services, where oxygen really is relevant to keep the ocean services running and in a healthy state. It also addresses threats to the climate system because of biogeochemical feedbacks. There are some greenhouse gases produced in low oxygen environments, nitrous oxide and methane. So there's a feedback from oxygen decline to climate. And we have to understand this and also be able to quantitatively include it in our climate projections. And overall, minimize the impact of ocean deoxygenation on the ocean economy. The outcomes we expect from this decade is to have increased knowledge about causes, impacts, and threats of deoxygenation, so a full comprehensive understanding. That's from ecological, socioeconomic vulnerabilities over biogeochemistry climate feedbacks via greenhouse gases, and also put all this into historical perspective, better understanding of the history of the Earth, to also allow us to provide natural baselines and indicators as well, develop indicators that tell us how close are we to some guardrails, what are possible dangerous tipping points, and how does all this interact with other stresses, warming, acidification, and possibly sea level change and changes in topography. We hope we will have an increased capacity to measure, document, map, monitor the ocean deoxygenation in order to have the best potential for understanding. So this includes many coastal knowledge in local databases. We have to combine that and really make this transparent, what is known in many communities, but not well coordinated on a global level. And we want to develop these indicators that help us to have early warning systems and to ensure safe operating spaces for society to help maintaining ocean services. In the end, this should lead to actionable strategies to mitigate, and whenever mitigation is not possible, to adapt to ocean deoxygenation on local scales, but also globally. The activities we have are listed here. So first, identifying and understanding threats. So where is it an issue, for what aspects of our life, which societies is this relevant? Because that will drive the development of mitigation and adaptation strategies. It includes full understanding of vulnerabilities of ecosystems, tolerances to oxygen changes, also to long-term, short-term exposures, also the interactions with other stresses, warming, acidification, and also changes in food supply. Could be eutrophication, could also be fishery impacts that change ecosystems from both ends, lower end and the top end. And all this will impact the resilience and the ability of ecosystems to adapt and cope with changes in oxygen. The second activity is to understand the processes. These are the detailed processes, chemical budgets, interactions, redox reactions, the microbial processes that are involved to stabilize or destabilize ecosystems. And this is really to develop a comprehensive understanding of all these small scale to regional scale processes controlling the stability, resilience of ecosystems. And this should help to then develop robust and actionable indicators for these safe operating spaces. They may vary regionally for different types of ecosystems, but we have to find out what are thresholds, are they thresholds, how do they interact with other stresses, and really develop the best scientific understanding to have good indicators that are robust and useful. The third activity is assessing and valuing the impact of deoxygenation. So this will work around a number of case studies to identify impacts of oxygen loss on individual ocean services. That could either include fisheries aquaculture, so provisioning, regulating, that's the climate service, particularly associated with greenhouse gas production, and supporting. This is nutrient cycle, water quality, biodiversity, tourism, and also cultural, spiritual elements. So why is the ocean? We value the ocean, and what role does oxygen play in all this? Certainly it does if you have ever been to an anoxic region along the beach where you see dead animals and where you also have a smell possibly of hydrogen sulfur. So this is then leads to this, once we have the value and understand why do we care about the ocean, why do different communities care about the ocean, to develop these understanding of ways how to monitor and mitigate the oxygenation. Where are we? How close are we to thresholds? And how would we declare success or failure of individual adaptation or mitigation strategies? So in the end, if money is flowing in there, if societies are changing and putting effort into this, we have to know if it is successful and should have also indicators to account for this, for success or failure. So this is basically a support strategy to support action that, whenever started, will have to be regulated, monitored, and managed. The fifth action is the economic societal consequences of deoxygenation. And here we again go into the economic valuation of the potential losses, but also then of the potential gains of activities. So this is these are trade-offs, and they will help us to better anchor activities in the political and societal decisions. So this goes to gross revenue and direct, indirect operating costs. It's not only what we do along the coast, but there are well, co-benefits and co-costs going down or up the societal pathways. This leads to, well, then the full, hopefully comprehensive global understanding of where we are, where do we have the most efficient strategies, how can we start and cooperate activities which may start locally, the hardest hit regions, hardest hit by the oxygenation, and from that further develop this quantitative understanding, see successes or failures of activities, and attribute these to actions or to, well, non-actions, climate change, eutrophication, and so on. And that should allow us also to test and confront our models with ongoing observed changes, to improve models and develop models that are capable to make projections on seasonal and perennial decadal scale. Paleo information may help or will help, and this will also help to better understand the history of the planet and the current, well, situation we are in, to see how delicate this is and where we have more space before we hit guardrails or tipping points, and where we have safer and more resilient regions. So this all should help to develop these actionable strategies. What we need is data, information, to really don't lose more time and put all the knowledge we have, which is not always in these global, fully accessible databases, to map and assess what is going on in the ocean. We also, of course, need new data. There's still huge data gaps. And here, robotic platforms, low-cost sensors that can be deployed along the coast, it will help a lot. Maybe also new computing infrastructures will help to map, to interpolate, extrapolate. And there's hope that we can also take benefit from the artificial intelligence revolution to really gain better understanding of this hugely distributed data of different quality in different times, different regions of the global ocean. So one key outcome is that we are heavily working on to get this done, is the Global Ocean Oxygen Atlas, which should be a transparent and consistent, quality-controlled global data set of oxygen and oxygen changes. And to support this, we of course need everybody. We need capacity building, ocean literacy. So we have to raise awareness of the issue of deoxygenation, also train people to measure oxygen, to report events that are seen either direct oxygen measures, or indirect effects, to make sure we don't lose information, and we all can collect it in things like the Global Ocean Oxygen Atlas. And therefore we hope that we can adopt also world-view citizens consultations to raise awareness and co-develop ways forward, and also use all the knowledge that is there, the stakeholder knowledge that will also help the science. It's not a one-way interaction. We need this two-way interaction, since local communities in many cases know much better than scientists sitting in some cozy office and working in front of a computer screen. So local communities know much more about oxygen changes, and have huge knowledge. The first study that was paid here by Marilaure led an effort about the strategy, how to develop this global oxygen database and atlas, which is now going on our way. And the second activity ongoing, to which this webinar today is a contribution, is our Global Ocean Oxygen Network webinar, about a monthly webinar where we team an earlier career scientist and a later career scientist, 20 minutes presentation each. We try to, from different continents, and have broad and different topics of oxygen aspects, to really develop this mutual understanding of different disciplines that come together, but also of the wider stakeholder community to raise awareness and generate, distribute knowledge, share information. And we invite all of you to participate in this webinar series. And that's the next one is on 30th of March, next edition of our webinar. And you can sign up to this. And I think we will provide a link in the chat where you can sign up later. That's it from me. That's a general overview of this global ocean oxygen decade. And now we move more into the specifics. Not sure, I haven't checked the chat if there's questions.
Exactly, Andreas. Just quickly,
yes.
We have some time at the end for some questions, but it might be good to just at least try to answer a few, and the rest will be definitely try to be answered later. There's one on the GO2NE, and that will be definitely part of the next presentation from Ilaria. But from Mark Costello, do the models that underestimate observed ocean oxygen loss only include physical processes, or do they include biological oxygen consumption demand increasing with warming?
Yes, so yeah, thanks. Very good question. The models, these models do include biogeochemistry, so they include pelagic ecosystems. Some models also include benthic ecosystems, but mostly on the microbial level. So there's not higher trophic levels are usually not included, fish, but most of the respiration is in the end done by bacteria, the aerobic respiration. So that's in some way included in these models. It's heavily parameterized and not very well understood, but these models are constructed to simulate the carbon cycle. So the biological carbon pump, and they are calibrated or tuned to give a good vertical profiles of dissolved inorganic carbon in the ocean. And that implies also nutrient supply and nutrient regeneration. So the models have this model data comparison in terms of carbon, dissolved inorganic carbon, and nutrients for the present state, also oxygen, but they do not, for some reason, reproduce the changes, these trends in oxygen loss. And so it could be physics, could be biology. My personal guess is it's mostly physics, which is not well represented. But yeah, this factor of 2 to 3 is huge, and it's scientifically embarrassing that we don't have a good answer. Otherwise, it's now known for about for several years, but it's very difficult to improve models. Many people have tried many changes to the models and haven't been very successful so far.
Thank you very much, and I ought to stop now talking. There are a lot of questions still, but I think we move on and then take the remaining questions during the last part of the session, and I won't interfere anymore. So I guess now it's then Marilaure and Veronique presenting the GO2NE.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. So I'm Marilaure Grégoire from the Liège University in Belgium. I am co-chairing the Global Ocean Oxygen Network with Andreas. And now we'll talk about the Global Ocean Oxygen Database and Atlas with Véronique Garçon. And as you can see here, so can you see very well my screen like that? Is it okay?
It's not full mode, so you
okay. Yeah, I can do it.
Yes.
Is it better?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we'll talk about this Global Ocean Oxygen Atlas. So this presentation is associated with a lot of co-authors. And so the main point that we will address today is, so what is this Global Ocean Oxygen Atlas and Database? Why do we need it? So why is it needed? We already have some database and atlas. Why do we need an additional effort? Why is it so timely now? And how can we build this atlas? What are the strategies to try to build this atlas? So the talk that we will present here today is in fact based on a paper to which you have the same community that have been associated. And this paper has been produced after several workshops with different scientists with different background, and we publish as an outcome of this workshop this paper that has been recently published in Frontiers in Marine Science that describe the need for this global ocean oxygen database and atlas, and that propose a roadmap, a kind of roadmap to build this GO2NE. So first point that we will address is what is exactly this global ocean oxygen database and atlas? What is it exactly? So if you want to summarize in a few words what we had in mind, so GO2NE has to contain data from the global, regional, and coastal ocean from Eulerian and Lagrangian platforms. We would like also to agree on common standard, which would be community approved metadata specification and transparent quality flagging and quality check procedure, and also to be aligned with the FAIR principles. The products that we would like to produce are graded fields and indicators to address ocean health and climate change. So what is it exactly just in a scheme? So GO2NE is represented here. It will contain the data from the coastal and open ocean from the different platforms, so Eulerian and also Lagrangian platforms. So we had in mind to integrate Argo and tuning also with gliders, mooring, etc. And based on that, we would like to produce products that would be maps and indicators with gridded field with different levels. So one would be based only on Winkler, then on Winkler and CTD plus Argo, and then plus glider, etc. So different level of products. And the idea of this GO2NE would be also to interact with a community of users, and it has to be really an engagement process, a two-way procedure where we interact with the user community in order to improve the product that would be delivered. So now I will give the floor to Véronique to speak about why GO2NE is needed now. Véronique.
Thank you, Marilaure. So now let's see why GO2NE is needed. Next slide. Yeah, as you all know, the ocean is losing oxygen. Andreas showed that picture. So the red dots really show the coastal site with hypoxia. And we know that since the 50, over 500 coastal sites have been identified with oxygen level below 20% saturation. And the number has been increased by a factor of 10 since the last 50 years. The blue dots here show the open ocean region, which show a minimum oxygen zone, and their volume has been quadrupled over the last 50 years. So within the ocean has lost about 2% of its oxygen inventory, meaning 77 billions of tons of oxygen over the last 50 years. And we definitely need high quality data to monitor properly this oxygen decline. Next slide. So will the oxygenation continue? And yes, so CEMIP 5 on the left side and the CEMIP 6 on the right side of the slide, Earth system model predict that deoxygenation will continue until 2100. But the deoxygenation trend is different from observation and model simulation. For instance, over the last 1960-2005, we have a trend of 0.6% for the model versus 2% for the observation. Quite a discrepancy indeed. So we really need high quality data to well constrain those IPCC CEMIP model projections. Next slide. So to improve our constraint on the deoxygenation rate, we need to build a unified database. Right now, there is no single entry point to download oxygen data. There are heterogeneous procedures across many databases, GDAC, regional hub. And the user community is dealing with different data set, different quality control, and different quality flagging procedures. When people want to do climatology, they also might use different interpolations methods. So the advanced data product end up being different. So here we just show an example of quality control procedure being in operation in the World Ocean Atlas with different quality check, but other people would use different ones. So we really need to come up with an internationally agreed way of procedures for quality checking. Next slide. We also need high quality data to advance our understanding on extreme events. So this is a slide from the last paper from Nikki Gruber showing the low oxygen extreme, the ocean acidification extreme, and the marine heat wave. And these occur in part due to natural processes, the black arrows, but the intensity, frequency, and duration is strongly affected by the anthropogenic atmospheric CO2 and the resulting change in weather and climate. So these three types of extreme can occur individually, but also together or in a close sequence as compound events. And these extreme will have important impact on organism and on the ecosystem they form. And these changes in turn will impact key marine ecosystem services that Andreas mentioned earlier, but also human welfare and livelihood in a series of cascading effects. The right panel here show the global patterns and trend of these biogeochemical extremes. So if you look at the right figure on that right panel, we are at 200-meter depth surface, and we see that the mean intensity of all days on which low oxygen extreme, which is the greenish colors, they occur mostly in the tropical band, in the tropical ocean. And this is actually where the Earth system model in SEMI 5 and 6 have a great difficulty in mimicking properly the very low oxygen concentration level. So, and they combine with extreme temperature events and pH decline events. So one has to understand that in order to detect extreme event, we need to have a robust baseline against which extreme can be detected. And the observational database really needs to be improved, and in particular in subsurface and intermediate waters. Next slide. So as you know, in the OMZ, in the oxygen minimum zone, it's extremely difficult for the organism to breathe. And any small deviation from the normal level of oxygen can really represent a daunting challenge for the species that have been adapted to these already low oxygen levels. So there is not much oxygen in water as compared to air. So animals really need to work hard to extract it. 1 liter of air is 1.3 gram and 0.3 gram of oxygen. 1 liter of water is around 1,000 gram, and we have 0.08 gram of oxygen at saturation surface. When you go down the water column, it's even lower level. So the difficulty of organisms to breathe normally will have an impact on their metabolism, reproduction, growth, fecundity, and mortality. Next slide. And actually, this is a dramatic example that Grant Pitcher, who is from the GO2NE group from South Africa, reported to us a couple of weeks ago of a major West Coast rock lobster walkout on the beach. You see on the right panel here, all the rock lobsters. And that was a bit north of Cape Columbine along the coast of South Africa. So it was a combination of a red tide event due to the dinoflagellate Perocentrum gracile. But the organism did not die because of toxin, but they died because of the drop of oxygen level down to 0.1 milliliter per liter from top to bottom in the water column. And the pH was very low, also 7.2. The left panel shows in red the extent of that massive event, which was about 60 kilometers long. So we see there are dramatic impact for economy, but also for small-scale artisanal fisheries, of course. So we need to be able to monitor properly, get high quality data to validate models that will allow us maybe to predict those combined events. Next slide. Oxygen starved coastal waters have also impact on tropical ecosystem and coral reef. And these two pictures in the bottom, the left one show one coral reef organism, Agaricia lamarcki, which is in good health, in normoxic condition. And the right one shows it after a major hypoxia event. So we're used to coral bleaching, but actually coral reef really suffer also from low oxygen level. And this is from Bocas del Toro of Panama. Picture, the work from Altieri et al. So the Altieri et al. Did a literature search, and they produced that worldwide distribution map of dead zone and coral reef where hypoxia has been involved in mass mortality of those reef organisms. These are the yellow dots, if you see on the map. The red dot are the coastal dead zones. So the intensity of the color purple indicates density of coral reef evaporation. So we see now that hypoxia, in addition to OA events, occur on coral reef and they affect tourism and livelihoods. So last point, why is GO2NE needed? There are more and more, next slide, sorry. There are more and more studies looking at climate-driven aerobic habitat loss in some region. This is a figure from a paper from Howard et al. In the California current system, where they use a metabolic index as defined by Dutch, which is a species-specific measure of the environmental capacity to meet temperature-dependent organism oxygen demand. And for that, we really need a very good oxygen database. The intensity of the future aerobic habitat compression will vary strongly among species that are, if you look at the top panel here, you have all the different phyla, crustacea, mollusca, and you see all the dots spread on that habitat loss. And what we see on the top panel is that the climate trend are expected to decrease habitat volume most severely in the right-hand corner. So it means low hypoxia tolerance and high temperature sensitivity. If you look at the 200, 400 meter a bit in the subsurface water, we observe a greater habitat loss, a lot of rate, and for most of the known ecophysiotype of the major phyla. And for instance, if we look at the green diamond, which is the anchovy ecophysiotype and Growlis mordax in the top 200 meter, we see that it will lose about 50% of its habitat loss in 2100. And this is the case of the RCP 8.5 scenario. So if we want to position habitat projection, this critically depends on having reliable partial pressure of O2, so O2 concentration, and being accessible with FAIR principle. So with that, I'll leave the floor again to Marilaure, who will tell us why is it so timely to build that atlas. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much, Vero. So now, okay. Voilà. So why GO2NE is so timely? Why now is really a good time for starting this building of the database. Because so if we look at the distribution of observation during the last decades, so here at the top you see the distribution of Winkler data in the global ocean, and at the bottom you see the same but for sensor data. And so we realized that this last 10 years, we had a very huge increase of sensor data, of the oxygen data collected by sensor compared to the Winkler. It's really a huge boom that you can see here. But so far, this sensor data, they are not systematically integrated in the climatology due to quality issue. That's what we raise in the paper. So if you look here at these two tables, on the left, you can see estimation of the quality that you need to address some scientific questions. So here we just give some of them as example. And of course, the quantification of the ocean oxygen trend is probably the scientific question that would require the higher accuracy of the data. And unfortunately, the accuracy of the sensor data, or maybe fortunately, has increased. So now it's much better than before, but it's also very sensitive to the calibration methods that you use for calibrating your sensor. And so here you can see the variation of the uncertainty of the sensor data according to the type of calibration that you have used. And so it means that according to that, the scientific question to which you can answer with your observation would differ if you use this type of calibration or if you use a batch foil calibration with 2-point adjustment, for instance. And we have to know that, the user has to know that. So how can we build this GO2NE? So here it's a scheme that has been proposed in the paper according to a lot of discussion that we had. And in particular, we had a very constructive discussion with people that are holding database, but also people that have the experience with the SOCAT building, the SOCAT product. And so based on this interaction, that's what we are proposing for the building of GO2NE. So GO2NE will interact strongly with IODE. And through this interaction with IODE, we will interact with the existing GDACs, for instance, Argo, ocean gliders, ocean sites, and ocean ship, for instance. And we will also interact because, of course, all these GDAC are collecting oxygen data, but the issue is that metadata definition, quality check is not uniform. It's not always uniform between these different GDAC. And even inside a given GDAC, it can also differ. So IODE will interact with the GDAC, but we will also interact with the National Ocean Data Center. That's very important. And in consultation with this GDAC and with the NODC, we would like to propose a consistent and uniform metadata structure and also quality check and quality flagging procedure. We would like to agree towards an alignment to map the procedure across the different GDAC and different data center. That's really the point in order to avoid to have differences in the data treatment. So the user, and then of course, all this agreement with the scientific community and with the database holders, etc., would have to be made available very clearly via the Ocean Teacher program, for instance. So now the user for the submission of data, how do we suggest that it proceeds? So there will be two possibilities. Either it goes directly to a centralized system, as it is already now, or it can also go to national ocean data centers. And there are also alternative ways to do that. You can also submit to the regional hubs. But the important thing is that if the data are not directly submitted to an ODC, it has to go back to an ODC to receive a data identifier and also to know, to be aware of all the data treatment that have been realized on the observation. So that's the different way that we are proposing for the building of GO2NE. Then after, when we will have this GO2NE, we will have, of course, the building of the different data products in interaction with the users. So how can we build GO2NE? Does GO2NE exist already? So no, it does not exist, but we know there are already very good initiatives that are existing. It's not needed to mention, of course, the World Ocean Atlas, the EMOTNet, the CMEM. So we know that there are already some database to build on. And the idea is really to work with all this with organization to agree on a kind of common procedure, common standards. How can we do that? We have applied for having a decade project in the frame of GOOD. So in the frame of the program GOOD, we have submitted a project that would be targeted, that would target the building of the GO2NE. And so we are waiting for the issue of this submission. And then just finally, would like to raise the attention about the Ocean Liège colloquium that would be co-organized by GO2NE and by the Ocean Liège colloquium. And this colloquium, the abstract submission is ended, but we receive almost 200 abstracts. It's still time to submit abstract, but only for poster, not for oral presentation. And you can find all the information here on the colloquium website if you are interested. So thanks a lot for your attention. We have to look for the question.
No, I think we will directly now go to the next talk, and then we take those questions at the end all together. And so I'm very happy that it's now Minhan Dai presenting Coastal SOS, another decade activity, and also, of course, how that addresses deoxygenation in the ocean. So the floor is yours.
All right. Sorry. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, good. Thank you all for joining us. And we have been hearing this, listening this excellent talk on the good and also this grow that oxygen atlas potentially. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this coastal region and the coastal hypoxia, and a very brief introduction to the coastal SOS. This is also a UN decade endorsed project, and I'm part of the good and also a lead PI for the coastal SOS, and I'm personally looking very much at the interaction between two programs and two projects. And I like to acknowledge many PIs and the scientists contribute this project from Coastal S, and also some of the help during my preparation of these slides. So I try to walk you through a little bit of the coastal hypoxia, and again, intro to the coastal SOS, and a little bit on the perspective. A big context, we're talking about oxygen or ocean acidification. Of course, we are looking at this rising atmosphere CO2 and warming that have been fundamentally altering the marine ecosystem. And you see this current shifting temperature, warming, circulation, stratification, ocean acidification, deoxygenation. And the deoxygenation is the focus of this presentation, and also, of course, these webinars. And we have seen this slide, but I'll try to highlight that again. Vera was showing this one. The site increasing about 5% per year based on the enhanced observation capacity, of course. And if you sum up the total coastal hypoxia area, it's a surface area of the UK. And I highlighted some of the big hypoxic coastal zones: Baltic Sea, East China Sea of Changjiang, for example, and Pearl River, Estuary, Chesapeake Bay, Northern Gulf of Mexico, of the Mississippi. And coastal hypoxia primarily related to warming, and because Andreas was talking about because dissolved oxygen decrease at temperature increase, the solubility decline with the warming. So you have the 1 degree warming, and essentially you have the 2% oxygen loss in the water. And when you zoom in the coastal ocean, eutrophication, excess nutrient is one of the major reasons. And plus, of course, there's many other reasons causing or forming this hypoxia. Today, I'm trying to focus more on the eutrophication that's primarily originated from the fertilizer consumption. So from here, you see actually quite clear the growth in fertilizer consumption globally, and during the last 6 decades in particular, starting dramatically in the 50s. And then you can see the trends starting from Western and Central Europe, then North America, and then now East Asia, I would say transforming into the South Asia and Africa as well. And with this fertilizer usage enhancement, you see the increased river nutrient input into coastal water. Biological, for example, biological available nitrogen and the phosphorus. This is pretty much well known. So with fertilizer consumption, you see the nutrient loading and the export to coast water, you see hypoxia very frequently. And here I see showing you this is the hypoxia region, a pretty large one, reaching 1,300 square kilometers. It's about 10 times larger than the Hong Kong area if you have been in Hong Kong. And this the middle panel shows the hypoxia area variability during the last 3 decades or so. And the peak actually we observed in 2016, it's reaching 22,000 square kilometers. It's a big, huge area. And then if you zoom in, I try to link the fertilizer usage in the Changjiang watershed. Then you have this enhanced nutrient concentration and export in the river and estuary. And then you see the consequence of this eutrophication, harmful algal blooms breakout. And again, this right panel is China Sea hypoxia reported or recorded. I try to speak a little bit of the science, how to quantify, because one of the long-standing controversial issue is if the hypoxia is directly linked into nutrient eutrophication driven, or it's pollutant, organic matter, ammonia, also the degradation of organic matter or ammonia oxidation also consume oxygen. So when you have this box in the coastal zone, and the nutrient will stimulate phytoplankton biomass, thinking of the biomass will cause in this bottom water hypoxia. Alternatively, the pollutants can directly cause in the hypoxia. So this is really a very important issue to quantify the oxygen consuming organic matter source. And this is related to nutrient maturation of organic waste pollution controls. So I assume you are familiar with this. If you have the river import both the nutrient and organic matter, and then you have the photosynthesis and the thinking of the biomass. When you have the favorite environmental setting, you will see the hypoxia zone formation. I have been trying to use this very simple method and essentially simultaneous determination of the organic oxygen consuming and DIC, that's the end product of the organic matter oxidation. In this way, we can quantify ultimately the oxygen consuming organic matter. So this is the first test I employ in the East China Sea of the Changjiang River and Estuary. Give you this, the result is the eutrophication driven marine organic matter dominant oxygen consumption. So this is almost exclusively the hypoxia caused the organic matter is sourced from the nutrient driven biomass production and their thinking. And then if you compare this extend from the East China Sea Gulf and to the northern Gulf of Mexico and Chesapeake Bay, essentially you come to the same conclusion using the similar method. So again, exclusively nutrient or eutrophication driven the hypoxia formation. However, I have to point out this hypoxia and the linkage between the nutrient input or reduction and the response in coast hypoxia is quite dynamic, sometimes not linear. Just give you a couple of different examples. One is Tokyo Bay. Thanks to the reduction of the emission, you start to see the increase in bottom water dissolved oxygen concentration during the last decade or so. And probably some of you are familiar with the Baltic Sea, and the Baltic Sea, as I showed, this fertilizer usage reduction actually happened in the 80s, and the peak emission of the nutrient is started there. And then you have the decline nutrient input, and you see the drop down of this hypoxia, and then this rebounding. So it's again, it's a nonlinear response. And the Bohai Sea is the big system in the northern China. And you see not very clear pattern in terms of the forcing, fertilizer usage, nutrient imports, and hypoxia and harmful algal occurrence frequency. So that's not simple causality there. Another example I would like to draw your attention to the Pearl River estuary of Hong Kong. And we did the similar estimation, actually come up with the nutrient driven, it's about 68% or 70%. And then other organic, terrestrial organic matter also contribute this hypoxia formation. So you see variability in between systems, in between this forcing and the response. So that leads to an overarching question: what are the key physical, biogeochemical, and the socio-economic process governing the dynamics, consequent coastal ocean eutrophication and climate change in different river, estuary, shelf system, and how are they coupled and interacted? That leads to these proposals, scientifically lead to the proposed coastal SOS. So this again, this is the coastal SOS, then the coastal zone under intensified human activity and the changing climate. This is a regional program, integrate science, management, and society, and to support ocean sustainability. And again, this is a UN decade endorsed project. I showed a lot of logo spanning from academic institution, foundation, industry sectors. So this is really a cross-sectoral partnership formed to try to tackle this integration between science management and the societal development. And this project was officially launched in November 26th last year at the UN Decade of Ocean Science event, the regional kickoff conference for the West Pacific and the region. So the key overview of the project, again, is quite a UN Decade style. You know, we have the co-design between industry sector, NGO, foundation, academic institution. We have team up 10 institution, academic institution, and tackle the integrate the natural and the social science, try to tackle the eutrophication, highly hypoxia-oriented project, and they try to co-deliver this through the novel cross-sectoral partnership and the observation network, data bank, coupled numerical model system, and toolbox for policy decision-making. Just try to step back the coastal, the importance of the coastal system and the people. And I want to repeat all these significant coastal region in these, in both the Earth system science and also the economic social development. And I put the people, that's the Chinese character, people, so to emphasize the dramatic and increasing Anthropocene characteristic. And this project is focused on East Asia. I try to provoke this, within this circle, there's more people living inside this circle than outside of it. So it's really dramatically concentrated people in this and human activity in this region. Again, this is the East Asia, and the East Asia Sea covers about 7 million square kilometers of sea area, and characterized by world's largest, longest rivers such as Yangtze and the Mekong, and again covers the 20% of the world population, major seafood export, and the largest expensive the coral reef, mangrove, seagrass, you name it. And we pick up 6 model systems and try to use a common approach between observation modeling and digital twin ocean. That's from Pearl River, actually Changjiang and Minjiang. This is within China and the Gulf of Thailand, Johor Strait, and outside in the East Asia seas. And just reiterate the fertilizer-driven system, and between those four systems, Changjiang again, GO2NE is in Fujian province, Thailand and Malaysia. You see the nutrient response, concentration response to the fertilizer usage. And then it caused the serious ecological consequence, including hypoxia. I won't repeat it again. The research framework, really, we want to focus on the both carbon footprint and nutrient footprint, look at both the climate, pollution, and economic development, and try to look into the ecosystem resilience and the societal sustainability. The foundation of those is the data, modeling, and the digital twin ocean. The key question, actually, I already spelled it out, really the key biogeochemical, physical, and the socioeconomic process. And we are doing this assessment attribution during the last 50 years and try to diagnose the current status and try to stimulate prediction for the next 30 years. The objective of this project is one is to formulate a novel cross-sectoral partnership. I was mentioning this academic institution, industry sector, and the foundation and government sector involved in this project already, and generate knowledge, of course, and empower effective ocean governance. So really the ocean decade philosophy, the science we need through co-design, and we try to co-deliver for a better ocean we want, and targeting the UN SDG 13, 14, and the 17. The approach we are trying to adopt is really the cross-system common approach. Again, this based on the integrated model, observation, and the digital twin ocean. And with the integrated cross-system analyze, we do diagnose, attribution, model, and try to provide solution. Just a little bit elaborate observation. Really, the key philosophy we try to articulate best practices, common approach to build up this observation system within these 6 model systems. Modeling, again, try to cover river, estuary, and the shelf system, and connecting with physics and using similar model framework. And one of the key components is the environmental socioeconomic model module will be included in this model system. And finally, digital twin ocean is quite hard, and it's a digital framework and connecting data modeling visualization, and I won't get into details. So the expected outcome, of course, a novel strategy for cross-sectoral partnership, a problem-driven solution-oriented observation network and data platform, and decision-making support system and toolbox. So that was a little bit, very brief intro of the coastal SOS. I would like to end with my presentation with 2 perspectives. One is, I think we are still facing grand challenge in studying and solving the coastal eutrophication and hypoxia, if you bring also the oceanification, because the watershed river estuary shelf is a very complex coupled system, and you are looking at not only oxygen, you are looking at the physical, biological, chemical process coupled together, determining the multiple stresses and the different dimension of the consequence. But the fact we have to face the long-term monitoring are often lacking. And the scientific challenge, as I mentioned, the source function environmental ecosystem response are non-linear. And at the same time, you will see or growingly see this development being intensified or will be intensified in underdeveloped countries. And then finally, the quantitative attribution, the prediction in particular regional, local scale are very, very difficult and challenging. Of course, you have facing the cross-cutting issues, observation modeling and technology, new technology revolution, and using the best practice of the ocean usage by the industries. So just give you a couple of examples of how these couple the physical, biogeochemical, and couple the carbon, pH, oxygen here. I just try to show, demonstrate this complexity and the coupling of those systems. And one of the example we have been talking this enhanced eutrophication not only cause the hypoxia, but also enhance the oceanification. So these are quite interactive process. And the second perspective I want to put forward is the partnership governance action. And I hope the previous two talks and plus my talk has convinced you marine ecosystem is facing unprecedented pressure from both the anthropogenic activity and the climate change. And it takes integrate ocean management, new models of the development, in particular agriculture and city level management, and international, of course, regional cooperation to conserve the ocean health. And I do think cross-sector partnership is of primary importance. And it's most important is take actions. And we need to take actions for science-based policy making and knowledge-based economy. And I think coastal assets in the good and many more of in the framework of the UN decade give a good start and at least a good attempt towards this goal. With that, I thank you all very much. Stop sharing now.
Thank you very much for those insights, which really show how a project can be really integrative, accounting for different stresses, different inputs, and then also trying to show how to move forward from that, not only detecting, but also providing some solutions. Now, another aspect of deoxygenation or oxygen as well in the ocean, and I'm very happy that that Karen Nimberg joins us here today for this panel. We had a slight change in the agenda, but I'm very happy that Karen now will present her project, Breathless.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. I'm going to share my screen now, and forgive me, I'm still waking up, but here we go. Let's see if I can get this going. So I'm just going to adjust things so I can see my screen a little bit better myself. So I'm going to present to you right now a project that is in process right now. And the nickname for it is Project Breathless. It has a much longer name about expanding our perspectives on hypoxia, and it really kind of focuses on sort of food web effects and beyond that, and also has a strong communication component. In fact, almost a year ago, I presented some of our communication results in this forum, in the form of the GO2NE webinar series, and I'll touch on that a little bit too. But you can see that for a project, a single project, it's got quite a few partners in it. And this is the formal name for it, New Directions to Explore the Spread and Impact of Ocean and Great Lakes Deoxygenation. We don't want to forget that deoxygenation is happening everywhere. It's not just in the oceans, it's in freshwater too. In fact, the impacts will likely be more dramatic there. The major aims are to explore hypoxia on the structure and function of food webs, and also look at how it affects the bioavailability of contaminants like mercury. We're also trying to explore ecosystem services impacted by hypoxia and also communicate about this problem. So kind of our whole conceptual model is something like this, where there are interconnections between various things, but I will say that we are fairly focused on fishes and food webs. So the places where this is happening are the Baltic Sea, which was already mentioned by Minhan, the Great Lakes in North America, and also the Gulf of Mexico in North America. The National Science Foundation of the US actually considers the Great Lakes as part of the oceans. So this is why we could include that. It consists of parts. There's empirical studies of biomarkers. This is something I'm very heavily into myself. We're also looking at using the Baltic as a case study of exploring size-structured food web models, which is a kind of a front in ecological modeling. We have an ecosystem service. The ecosystem services we have been discussing as a group to some extent, and also their economic impacts at the University of British Columbia through our partner, Rashid Soumela. And also we're communicating with different audiences. So just to sort of look at the structure of our setup for the biomarker part, we've got a gradient in each of these systems. Northern Gulf of Mexico has fishes that are we're going from more benthic and local effects to broader ranging fishes that may show less of an effect. And that's probably the case for the Northern Gulf of Mexico and Lake Erie. The Baltic seems to be sort of universally affected by hypoxia, so that even the Baltic cod have experienced some severe impacts, the top predator there. So with this biomarkers part, we're taking advantage of the fact that body materials provide a lot of ecological information through looking at trace elements and isotopes of various sorts. And different materials have different useful properties. So one of the things I look at a lot are ear stones or otoliths of fish. They're made of aragonite, that's calcium carbonate with a little bit of protein. Eye lenses are actually completely protein, and then muscle tissue. These top two provide lifetime records as they grow throughout life and accumulate chemistry. Muscle tissue gives you a picture of recent activity. And you can mix and match these in complementary ways. So that's sometimes it gets a little complicated, but that's what we're going for. Otoliths are structures in the heads of fishes. They are part of the hearing and balance system. And when you make a section, you can see that there are many different sizes and shapes for different species. You can also see that if you make a cross section through one of these, you can see these ring-like structures that persist and accumulate through life. And so they really actually have a story to tell, if you will, from the birth, which would be the initial formation, all the way through life to death when they're caught or die in some way. For hypoxia, we've found that the trace element manganese, which becomes available at very, very low oxygen concentrations, but then sort of sticks around for a while, is a pretty good recorder of hypoxia exposures. And in this case, with a cod otolith cross section, we can see the visual optical image, and then we can see the same otolith analyzed with synchrotron radiation, and we can see manganese episodes, which are colorful, red being highest exposure. And this really speaks for itself. You can see those episodes occurring over the lifetime of the fish. And we can correlate those with other trace elements and try to get an idea of migrations, for example, and other things going on in fish condition and so on. We also have a partner, Roxanne Razavi, who is a mercury expert, and we're tying in this expertise with the fact that mercury becomes more bioavailable in anoxia. So anoxic conditions promote microbial communities that methylate mercury and actually make it more toxic. And so we're studying the interaction of that as well, whether that is an issue or not. And one of the structures that actually takes up mercury really well is the lens of an eye. And so mercury attaches to the photophores, but seems that to be embedded, gets accumulated too. So we're looking at lifetime. So this is a cross section of an eye lens, and then this is the corresponding mercury map, again, taken with a synchrotron. We're using different instruments now. But you can see that there is a lower in the interior part, and then as this particular fish switched to eating other fish, it started accumulating mercury. There are a lot of other trace elements too that we're looking at and still testing out, but selenium may be something that might help us sort of time the uptake of things too. So we can see that there's some seasonal banding, for example, in many of the fish eyes that we see. But also remember that these are layers of pure protein, so we can look at stable isotopes too, light stable isotopes. Carbon is often used for provenance. Nitrogen is used, isotopes are used for trophic level, and sulfur can tell us about hypoxia. And without going into too much detail about this, this is just some quick results from a pilot study, but just showing how one can extract different layers and analyze them for the 3 different isotopes I just mentioned. And here we can see from the inner core all the way to the outer ring, measurable changes in carbon, maybe shifting habitat, nitrogen actually going up and then down, maybe showing us a different shift of diet, and then also changes in sulfur here. So this is just to sort of demonstrate how we can do that. But this means that we can combine that with our otolith indices of hypoxia exposure and try to, this gives us a better picture. This, at the risk of this being a little too detailed here, this is showing some recent data, some data I recently received, and again, a carbon and nitrogen isotope map. And what I wanted just to point out is that the orange points are from a normoxic site that we're studying in the Baltic Sea. And then the blue dots are from a hypoxic site. And across, I was able to actually get a little bit of material from lower food web parts, some primary producers and primary consumers, as well as our fish. And to my, it was interesting to me to see that the across the entire food web, that the hypoxic site is elevated in nitrogen, which is very likely because of denitrification processes going on, and also has declined significantly in the carbon isotope, which is not about moving anywhere, but rather most likely, again, about changes in carbon due to deoxygenation or possibly acidification too. And in my studies, don't have time to talk about it today, but the deoxygenation looks like it's being combined now with incipient acidification effects on food webs too. Just a quick, if I can, try to explain again about the coupling of these 2 biomarkers. This is my PhD student, Hadis, and she's studying fishes in the Great Lakes and Lake Erie here. And she has a fish that was collected in the western part of Lake Erie. And here she has again peeled out layers from an eye lens. You can see that this is increasing with time in nitrogen, which probably indicates this is a yellow perch fish, middle of the food web, probably switching from benthic invertebrates to fish or a mix with fish, but also comparing this outer layer of the lens to the corresponding muscle tissue, we see a real deviation in carbon isotope, which probably means that we can use eye lenses to help us remove some of the interferences from, for example, lipids. But what she then looks at is the otolith as well, and this is from the same fish. And we see that in the core, it's elevated in our indicator of hypoxia for the first and second years. And then after that, it's these on the edges, there's no evidence of hypoxia. On the other hand, mercury from the same fish indicates an increase with age. And so likely this is due to trophic effects rather than hypoxia. So this is how we can combine some of these. This work is going to be replicated also in the Gulf of Mexico, and also it's my part in the Baltic. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Ben Walther, my partner there, and his PhD student Jacob. They got started a year after us, and of course everyone is a little behind because of COVID, but their focus is both in the open Gulf of Mexico and also in a very, very polluted embayment, which is a site which was heavily contaminated by mercury, among other things. So this will be a very good site to look at. We're also collaborating with a geochemist whose expertise is looking at nitrogen isotope ratios in otoliths, and she's helping us to look at make comparisons again with a different technique, but coming up with again estimates of changes in the food web structure, comparing hypoxic and normoxic sites. We also have a modeling group focused mostly on the Baltic Sea, led by our postdoc Elizabeth Dusky and Anna Gordmark and Michaela Cassini from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. And just like Minhan was saying about the East China Sea, there are increasing occurrences of cyanobacteria, for example, in the Baltic Sea. So these massive algal blooms are fueling a lot of the hypoxia. This is size-based modeling. And the questions that they're posing are how hypoxia affects the fish community and resource dynamics, biomass growth and yield through the processes of fish growth and mortality, and are interested in asking about the contributions of different ecological and physiological pathways to the responses to hypoxia. And the model is a very complex one and was recently calibrated and is now starting to produce results, which I won't have time to show you today. But the model features the cod and the flounder that are in our biomarker study, but it also expands and looks at the pelagic system too. It looks at herring and sprat, and models the benthic and pelagic lower food web parts as just sort of big boxes that are size structured nevertheless. So I don't have time to go into all the details of that either. Our ecosystem services at risk from deoxygenation, we're sort of slowly working on a group think about it, but if people have ideas and wish to contribute, I'm very interested in that too. But I wanted to mention our partner Rashid Sumaila, who's also part of the Global Ocean Oxygen Network, and his PhD student Hong Sik Kim are actually trying to combine fishery models and bioeconomic models to come up with economic impacts of hypoxia on a key fishery species in British Columbia on the Pacific coast of North America, a very, very important flatfish, the halibut over there. So this is again work in progress. I worked with students, a couple of students at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, and we actually came up with a model in a class. So I ran a class about the ecosystem services at risk from ocean deoxygenation. We were able actually to pull one of the projects to publication, looking at actually a kind of an unusual ecosystem service, which is actually looking at maximum size of keystone fish in the Baltic Sea, the Baltic cod. And the graph over here shows the changes over time of maximum size. They have shrunk dramatically by about 40 centimeters over this period of time. So that's a huge amount. And we modeled the factors that we thought influence the decline in the maximum length. And we found that hypoxia had the greatest effect in the model. We've included fisheries and prairie resource availability and found that actually fishing itself was not significant in the model. And the rest of the paper, and this is because right now the fishery has been closed because the population is in such bad shape, certainly in part from the hypoxic effects. And even so, the impacts, the fish are not recovering. So hypoxia looks like it's a strong contender as an explanation. And the rest of the paper discusses the ecological impacts of this. Finally, then we have a strong team doing messaging. Trying to take all of this information that we're gathering, and go beyond that and make communications about the situation with the world's oceans and the linkages that, for example, Minhan talked about with watersheds. And this is the communications team. Mostly these are people at my home institution of SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. And the general, the main objectives are to generate public awareness of deoxygenation, to provide information, to translate that and develop novel ways of communicating about it, and also make recommendations for how stakeholders can engage and strategize solutions. So we'd love to reach out and connect with people about this. One of the things I've been interested in is taking data that I collect, all my geeky data, and turning it into tones to create audio. And last year I presented some of this in the GON forum. But what we've done is compose songs with data that we've interpreted to illustrate the impacts of hypoxia. And I must say it's had a dramatic effect. We found that audiences often get rather emotional when we play the songs for people, and we're preparing some new ones now. We're very fortunate that we've been able to connect with a very important science center in Stockholm, the Baltic Sea Science Center, which is at the world's oldest open air park, Skansen. And they have a beautiful aquarium. They have a series of aquaria. And the cod that are here, this is a sturgeon, but this is a cod. And I have to say, the cod, when they came in, were just tiny. They were maybe as big as from here to here. And when they get good oxygen and good food, they grew. These are local fish. And so we can see that this is not because of genetic, the shrinkage of fish is not because of genetic effects. And we are working now with them on a couple of displays, and they're generously going to allow us also to conduct some surveys to see how people actually respond. So that work is going on. We have a website. I can't see the URL myself because I've got a banner from Zoom in the way, but the website name is up here. You can check us out. But I also wanted to give a shout out to another project, sort of a sister project going on in Norway called Hype on Fjord Fish. Anna Gru Salvanes is the director of that. Lisa Levin from our Global Ocean Oxygen Network is also a partner, as am I. And this is looking at the goal here is to look at the many factors that lead to deoxygenation ongoing in fjords, and to study the impacts on food webs there, on demersal fisheries. So that's it, pretty much. It's a work in progress. I like to say it's got everything but the kitchen sink in it, as we say in English. So it's a really sort of encompassing project. I think it's going to take us a long time to really sort everything out. but it's been fascinating and really fun to work with people on this. So I'm going to stop there and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for showing another great aspect of science and ocean oxygen and those other new possibilities we have to detect some of the impacts and hopefully then also move to the solutions. Now we have some time for questions, and I go a little bit backwards and maybe directly start with the question we have for you, Karen. And there's a question from Harry Kopani, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, who congratulates on you on a great presentation as well. And there's a question, he's wondering if there is a consolidated document that describes these mentioned isotopes and the usage explained in a kind of like guideline manner summary.
My proposal to the National Science Foundation has this information, but that's a good point. Perhaps we should write a methods paper on our approach. That's an excellent suggestion, Harry. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And then I also directly go here to Andreas and Veronique. Do we have a quantification of the increased flux of greenhouse gas emissions, N2O and methane, due to the expansion of oxygen minimum zones and coastal hypoxia?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. We tried to do that in models, which are not very reliable, particularly not in those regions, and also, as we said, underestimate the oxygenation. And there we see an increase in production of nitrous oxide, particularly up to, well, 50% in the low oxygen areas. But because of increased stratification, this doesn't necessarily reach the atmosphere. In current models, actually, the air to sea flux is decreased because more of the nitrous oxide stays in the ocean, but less is ventilated to the atmosphere in this very across the highly stratified surface warm layer. This is all very uncertain. We nevertheless measure. Well, off Peru, we have measured, I think, the highest nitrous oxide concentrations in surface waters ever over the last 10 years. They were a factor 3 higher than previously. Still, I would say the major fluxes of nitrous oxide are not from the ocean. So it's about 30%, I think, globally. A lot comes from land, agriculture. And that's probably where much of the increase we see as well comes from. But we have to look at the ocean, whether there's any, well, this would be a positive feedback on climate. And of course, we have to be concerned about positive feedback, accelerating feedbacks. And we have to concern because current models seem to underestimate the changes. And these are the tools we use to try to quantify feedbacks. So we err on the we underestimate the strength of these positive feedbacks.
Thank you.
I would like to add, if I may, on the point on observations, because I think N2O really need to become essential ocean variable. And we mentioned the very importance of having a global ocean database unified. And there are efforts, and I've seen Herman Benge was part of the participant, and I think we should really stress here the great work done by the Memento database. And we really need to enforce the amount of measurement of N2O, but also, having a unified database. So yes, I think your question is very important, but like for oxygen, if we want to be able to constrain the models, we really need to have an extended database, and N2O and methane are key components. And I'm talking on being chair of IOCCP here. We really consider having N2O as an EOV part of the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, highlighting that there's still a lot to do for us over the next 10 years. I think, and also really welcoming everybody here again to join us in our efforts. So if you have any ideas, if you have anything, I put my email in the chat and we will follow up. So, but without further ado, I'm just going to the questions in opposite order, but so it's a little bit all over the place. But a question to Minhan, can you tell us more about the attribution procedure you intend to use to distinguish really the climate change and anthropogenic inputs, natural changes, for example, and for the hypoxia onset?
Yeah, this is from Christoph. Thanks, Christoph, for the question. It's a real tough one and a challenging one. It's one of the concentrated, focused question we have been working on. But essentially, for the coastal hypoxia or the onset, I think the preliminary hypothesis would be mainly driven by the anthropogenic activity from the land. And then looking at the climate impact, mainly affecting this environmental physical dynamic circulation setting. So I would say the anthropogenic forcing is from the land, and the climate change signal is from the offshore. So that's the preliminary basic hypothesis. Then we can look into this, decompose the two factors impacting on the hypoxia and its duration, frequency, size, and onset. There's no magic solution. We have to use the data and the model. And in terms of data, we start to accumulate these decadal times series data, and in terms of both stresses and also the response in the coastal ocean. That's the good part. And then the reason why coastal SOS pick up some of this model system with accumulation of the data, and with some of this Gulf Thailand, it's essentially little data. There's essentially no data. So we're using the cross-system integrate analyze to draw these hints. And then most important, I think the main driver, the socioeconomic component, we are trying to integrate the data, the model, development model, and all these agricultural fertilizer usage patterns, stuff like that. So that's the way to chip in for this land forcing part. And relatively easy would be the circulation pattern, because again, we start to accumulate the offshore interface data between the coastal ocean and the offshore and even the open ocean. So that's if you take the east boundary or west boundary current, that's really quite related to the coastal hypoxia nearshore. I hope this partially answers your question, Christoph. It's a tough one, yeah.
Thank you very much. And I directly follow up with another one from Karina von Schuckmann. Which are the opportunities to obtain thresholds crossing boundaries of the 3 pillars of sustainable development, as referred to coastal hypoxia, for example, resilience and sustainability? So environment, society, economy. That's a tough one, huh? Yunan?
Who's this one for?
There's a question from Karina von Schuckmann. Which are the opportunities to obtain thresholds crossing boundaries for the 3 pillars of sustainable development in those coastal hypoxia regions, including the environment, society, and economy? Right?
Yeah, that's. I hope I understand the question. What's the opportunity to obtain threshold crossing boundary? Yeah, it's integrated, and think these that's why one of the partnership, because you have these the scientists, the academic institution provide this knowledge, and then the governmental sector governs the ocean, and then the industry sector actually these use the ocean. So that's the first of the momentum we have together. And then there is no magic solution. You have to use the ecosystem-based and the integrated approach to tackle these cross-boundary issues. And but there's I actually under this high-level ocean panel, we have published a paper at the Nature Ecology and Evolution last year. They call it Integrated Ocean Management. And we put forward some of the case studies that relatively good, well balanced between these three pillars, and also knowledge-based and with the local characteristics. And I can send you this paper if you want to, if you're interested to look into the details. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mina. And again, I think it also shows like that there's really to define those thresholds, what is needed, but for that we also really need to account for the human factor, which is a big question mark quite often. What are the reactions then for society and economy, and interacting as well with social scientists, with economists in our daily work? Yeah. I think is a challenge we have for the next 10 years, and I hope some will interact more with us.
Also, just a quick add, and I think the real question is that we are facing is the tipping point. I think the diagnosis and the justification, if some of the system reach the tipping point, then we can trace back how, again, these last 50 years in particular, what's the main driver from the natural forcing and economic forcing. Then we can come up with a resilient optimization state. That's the way we are looking into the different system as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And a few more science questions, and then maybe going a little bit to the how can we engage more people and more scientists in the good activities. So just here one more question: why the oxygen level varies in different parts of the ocean? Is it also a relationship with the depth of the ocean? A question from Yishnu. Maybe to Andreas, Marilaure, Veronique.
Yes, there's a relation to depth because of the respiration profile. So most of the respiration happens close to the surface, and the deeper you go, less organic matter is available. So shallower regions have a higher oxygen consumption in general, and the oxygen is usually lowest just below the surface mix layer, where still there's direct exchange, gas exchange with the atmosphere. And but that's well, it all depends on the supply of organic matter, which is usually also closest or highest in upwelling regions where there's a lot of nutrient supply. And that's why we have these oxygen minimum zones along the eastern boundaries of the oceans, usually in the Pacific and Atlantic, where supply of nutrients is high and therefore respiration is very high. There's some reason the sediment interaction plays a role, like in the Baltic Sea and in semi-enclosed seas, shallow seas, where low oxygen conditions at the water sediment interface then can trigger the release of nutrients, of phosphorus, particularly phosphate, from the sediment. And so there's another potential for feedback, and that's probably, or at least in my impression, very important for many of these possible runaway feedbacks, even that trigger further eutrophication from below, from the sediments, and further oxygen consumption and deoxygenation. And their water depth is very critical for these feedbacks.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else wants to add, otherwise we move to the last more scientific question and then go a little bit more to the interaction between good, gone, and the rest of the community. Just so, is it possible from Mark Costello that oxygen observations are biased towards areas with low oxygen and overestimate true oxygen decline? Marilaure?
Yes, so what we can say is that we have map of the oxygen decline. So we have a three-dimensional estimation of the oxygen decline. And so we can see that the oxygen is declining not only in oxygen minimum zone, as Andreas showed during his presentation, but it's declining in regions that are rich in oxygen. And for this region, it's of course less problematic because they have a lot of oxygen. If oxygen is declining, it will not affect immediately the population living there, but it's a symptom of a general phenomena. So I guess that these spatial maps show that the problem is not only in OMZ, but it's more wide, and you can have that, for instance, in the Arctic oceans, where the decreasing trend is probably one of the most important. And we also have that in the deep ocean, which is quite new, but the paper from Schmidtko showed that it is not only in the OMZ, in the 100 to 1000 meter depth, but it's also below, and that was quite new. And this is what is investigated, I guess, with the global ocean models. They show that at depths below 2000 meters, we saw that the ocean was at equilibrium. There is no trend, but the recent observation seems to suggest that it could not be the case. Of course, there are plenty of oxygen, but there is this decreasing trend that is there and that is ongoing. So that's what I can say. Maybe Andreas, you can complete, or I don't know who else, but yeah.
Maybe I can add something. I don't think oxygen observation are biased towards the low oxygen region. And I think Marilaure showed the advent of the Argo floats, which are equipped with oxygen sensor. They are, released everywhere. So we really need to increase dramatically the amount of Argo floats and autonomous platform, which is a bit less expensive than going at sea. So I think this is very crucial, but I don't think there is a bias towards, low oxygen region. I think we need to really better assess data, their quality, and this is really what the effort is meant to be done within GO2NE. So that's very important. And in the coastal ocean, I think it's also very crucial, but I would not say there is a bias. And the more we deploy autonomous platform everywhere, the more uniform the coverage would be, I would say.
Thank you very much. And let's move a little bit, like also what we try to do here is really engaging the community and presenting good and what we want to do in the next 10 years. And so there is one question from Lijing Sheng, who's wondering how the good community plans to interact, collaborate with other communities, for example, in ocean warming and so on, and how people work on oxygen, working on oxygen to join good and gone. And I take the liberty just to maybe give it a kickstart that events like today are really how we want to start this engagement. Also the upcoming Liège conference, of course. There will be soon, and this is also thanks to collaboration already between two programs, the GOOD and OAS, cruises on a regular basis to build the capacity, joint capacity to measure ocean acidification and ocean deoxygenation. But of course, it's also for you an opportunity to look at what is proposed in the GOOD, what we think should be the framework for ocean deoxygenation for the next 10 years as outlined in the proposal, and say, I would like to contribute, I would like to work with you on that and that part, and can't we just join forces and then develop concrete projects, concrete actions. We are now in the stage of moving there a little bit more concretely, and we envision as well that after the Liège conference, some more concrete actions will follow. But it's only GOOD as a framework as well for a lot of people to act, and it's not that the GON group is directing it. We are just trying to provide a framework, if I might say. And people,
Yes, perhaps if I can add, so we also plan to have a summer school next
Yes.
Year, 23 in Chile, so that will be announced relatively soon. We would like to have capacity building events, also stakeholder involvement. This probably to a large extent has to happen locally, so that we would welcome any suggestions, and we can help making that known and building connections. We don't have any funding directly, so but we can. I think this program can help to lobby for funding, and we are very well. We are active in that, and we are very willing to help. But whenever you have local systems, stakeholder knowledge, ideas for capacity building, for data sharing, please find opportunities to get funding and do that. And if you want, you're very welcome to do that. Shared with us, so share the information. We can try to support however we can. There's also the opportunity to write, to propose projects and activities in the UN decade. I think there's calls every few months now. We have to see how this really develops. I think it's up to the entire community to develop this. So far, I think the rules are, to me at least, it's not completely clear, but we have to move things forward in the interest of better collaborating and really resolving these issues, the threats to the ocean, and better understanding ocean deoxygenation, and co-develop mitigation and adaptation efforts. And we can then basically broker information. We hope that via the web page we can make this more visible as well, and connect initiatives, connect people, and be a contact hub. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and also provide some coordination among those, that it's really that partners can be identified to move certain things forward. There's I see a few hands up. We won't be able to take all the questions, but please also type them in the chat and we will try to answer them later. But here's one question about how can regional programs join or be endorsed by GO2NE? Are there specific conditions for the endorsement? I might just take that as well. So there was just a call for projects, and there will be a next one on the 15th of April, most probably. The last one included GO2NE as well, and we welcomed very concretely project. We are not sure yet if we will open that again, but you can always go via this road as well and ask to be affiliated to GO2NE, and then we will see how this is. Of course, would be nice to have some reference to some of the envisioned outcomes, activities we are planning. Besides this official decade endorsement, of course, there's always a way, just also contact us, and we can then move forward in really trying you as well to be officially endorsed. There are now calls every 3-4 months. It's not such a big thing. And also develop that together might be sometimes good, so that it's really co-designed. But of course, addressing the local specificities and the regional requirements.
Can I suggest something? Because there was a question on GO2NE as well. So here the idea with these activities that we have today with GO2NE, with the colloquium, with the webinar, it's really to build a community, to engage with the people, to network, to show that the community is there. And then there is, of course, this possibility to submit the project for endorsement in the decade, the call for decade action. And then, yeah, you have seen the thematic that we are proposing, and you have to know that for GO2NE, that's what we did. So GO2NE, we had a lot of questions when the database would be available, etc. So here the idea is really to raise interest and to engage a community around the building of GO2NE. But then what we would need is also to receive a kind of support in terms of human resources, and that's what we are trying to do with this decade and with the decade project. So we submit GO2NE as a project and with the intention to have this atlas, and then we will see. So that's really all what we can do, is just to try to give idea and to raise interest and maybe hopefully to get funding. So that's where we are.
Yeah, thank you. And one last question before we have to finish today's meeting, about how to include traditional indigenous knowledge in our activities. What do you think? I think there we honestly still have a little work to do, and welcome really also partners to help us with including the traditional knowledge. But yes, Veronique.
I think traditional knowledge, for instance, when you work in country like Chile or Peru, you talk with the fishermen, the traditional fishermen, the small artisanal fisheries, and you learn a lot from them too. So in the way, and it's building stakeholder co-designing. And for instance, of Chile, they're planning now to put sensor on their net. So there is, really a close collaboration. So this is the way I think introducing traditional knowledge is really by dialogue and co-designing. And I'm sure this is also what Minan they do in their project, the Coastal SOS.
Okay.
I think also that it relies on what, as they call them, the knowledge holders have in their own histories too, in the history that is passed down, and how they describe the systems and how they've changed over time. And I've heard it said locally in my area that climate change has some very unprecedented phenomena that they don't have any sort of baseline to compare against. So that's one thing that you might find too.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's really showing again the urgency to react in ocean deoxygenation, as the impacts we've never seen before. And I think we have to close now. We are 12 CET sharp. I think it was a great session. I hope really that a lot of people can engage with us as well in the GO2NE program. That we make a lot of progress over the next few years and really create this deoxygenation community. So I say thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to the attendees, and see you to the next usual session of the GO2NE webinar on the 30th of March. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kirsten.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day all. Yeah.